History is usually told as a sequence of dates and names, victories and defeats, kingdoms that rise and fall. It is the story inscribed on tablets, written in chronicles, and preserved in books. Yet behind this official story lies another kind of memory, a quieter one. A memory carried not in archives or monuments, but in whispers, in songs, in tales passed from one generation to the next. These myths, often dismissed as fables or fantasies, hold a different kind of truth. They are not exact records of what happened, but echoes of experience that human beings were determined not to forget. When we listen to a myth, we are not only entering a story, we are entering a vessel of memory, carefully crafted to survive centuries of change. Empires crumble, libraries burn, languages vanish. But myths endure because they are flexible, adaptable, able to change shape while protecting the essence of what they remember. They are like rivers. The surface may shift with every season, but the water is always flowing from the same hidden source. This is why so many cultures across the world carry tales of great floods, of lost lands, of hidden kingdoms beneath the earth. They are not random inventions, but resonances, memories of upheavals so vast that they etched themselves into the psyche of humanity. The rise of the seas at the end of the Ice Age, the eruption of volcanoes, the trembling of earthquakes, events so terrifying and transformative that communities could not afford to forget them. And so they wrapped them in stories, clothed them in symbols, and carried them forward as myths. But myth does more than preserve trauma. It also carries hope. The story of a hidden land across the sea is not only a warning of loss, but a reminder that somewhere, something better once existed. A paradise, a golden age, a place of wisdom and beauty. These stories whisper that what is lost might one day be found again, and that humanity, even after destruction, carries within it the seeds of renewal. When we explore myths as memory, we begin to see that they are not fragile things. They are not fantasies to be dismissed with a smile. They are resilient. They adapt as generations retell them, changing details to fit new times, but always preserving the lesson beneath. Water can rise, land can vanish, life can be swept away in a single night. Yet survival is possible. Wisdom can be preserved, and hope can endure even in the darkest times. Psychologists such as Carl Jung described myths as the language of the collective unconscious. Archetypes, he called them, patterns etched into the human mind that resurface again and again across cultures. The flood, the paradise lost, the descent into the underworld. Each is a reflection of our deepest fears and longings. They are not limited to a single people or age. They belong to humanity itself, arising wherever people struggle with fragility, mortality, and the longing for meaning. Think of the Irish legend of Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth lying far across the Western Ocean, or the Polynesian memory of Hawaii, the ancestral homeland swallowed by the sea, or the Hopi emergence stories where ancestors rose from underground realms after cataclysms destroyed earlier worlds. The Yoruba in West Africa speak of sunken cities beneath rivers. Aboriginal peoples in Australia remember the great waters that transformed the land at the end of the Ice Age. Each story different, each story local. Yet together they form a chorus, a testimony that myth carries something more than imagination. The persistence of these stories across so many distant cultures reveals their deeper function. They are humanity's way of remembering fragility. They remind us that nothing is permanent, that lands can drown, that kingdoms can vanish, that survival sometimes means retreating into the earth or clinging to high ground as waters rise. These lessons are too vital to be forgotten, and so they live on as myths. Stones crumble, but stories adapt. Temples may collapse, but myths can shift their form and survive in song or tale. This is why myths often last longer than monuments. They are alive. They breathe with each telling. A child hears a story at night and carries it into adulthood. They pass it on with slight changes, weaving it into the world they know, and still the essence remains. A warning, a promise, a memory that refuses to die. This interplay between fragility and resilience is what gives myth its power. In myths, we hear the voice of the ancestors, not with precision, but with depth. They do not tell us the exact shape of the wave or the precise date of the fire, but they tell us what mattered most: That destruction came suddenly, that survival required wisdom, that hubris invited downfall, and that hope persisted even after loss. In this way, myths are both memory and mirror. They reflect the experiences of the past while revealing the fears and longings of the present. So when we begin this journey into deformed history, we are not looking for myths as lies to be exposed. We are listening to them as clues, lanterns lighting the way into the unknown. Perhaps Atlantis never existed as Plato described. Perhaps Shambhala is not hidden in Himalayan valleys. Perhaps the underworld cities are only metaphors. Yet even if they are not literal, they still matter profoundly. They tell us something real about human memory, human imagination, and human survival. This is why myths are worth listening to with care. They may not give us direct evidence, but they shape the questions we ask. They lead us to search beneath the seas, to scan jungles, to wonder about what has been lost. And sometimes, as with Troy or Dwarka, the story leads to a discovery. A city once dismissed as myth rises again from the dust or the waves, reminding us that myth is not only imagination but also a fragile vessel of memory. And so, as we begin, we hold myth gently in our hands, not as fantasy, not as fact, but as memory carried in story. Memory that endures where stone and paper fail. Memory that whispers of floods and ruins, of wisdom and loss, of cycles that turn again and again. To follow these myths is not to escape history. It is to rediscover it in its most human form, soft, fragile, yet resilient. Stories that refuse to die. Stories that are, perhaps, the oldest monuments we possess. When we speak of Atlantis, we return to one of the most enduring and mysterious stories ever written. The tale begins not with explorers or archaeologists, but with a philosopher. Plato, writing in the 4th century BCE, crafted dialogues that have haunted human imagination for more than 2,000 years. In the texts Timaeus and Critias, he presents a story told to the statesman Solon, a story passed down from Egyptian priests who claimed it was already 9,000 years old. It is a tale of a great island civilization, larger than Libya and Asia combined, lying beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the place we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato describes Atlantis as a place of extraordinary power and wealth. Its kings commanded vast armies, its ships sailed across the seas, and its engineers built temples plated in gold and walls that gleamed like orichalcum. It was said to be a paradise, rich in resources, fertile in soil, and advanced in knowledge. Yet as Plato tells it, this greatness carried with it a shadow, hubris. The Atlanteans, once noble and virtuous, became corrupted by their power. Their ambition turned outward. They sought to dominate the world, spreading conquest across lands and seas. It was in this moment that they turned their gaze toward Athens. Athens, in Plato's telling, became the defender of freedom against this mighty empire. In a great battle, the Athenians resisted and overcame the Atlantean power. Yet victory was fleeting, for soon after, the gods punished Atlantis for its arrogance. In a single terrible night and day, earthquakes and floods consumed the island. It sank beneath the waves, vanishing from the world forever. All that remained was memory. A tale told in fragments across cultures, carried forward in whispers until Plato gave it voice. The question that haunts us is whether Plato intended this as literal history or allegory. Some argue that Atlantis was simply a moral parable, a symbolic warning against arrogance and corruption. In this view, the story was never meant to describe a real place, but to serve as a mirror for Athens itself, a reminder that greatness must be tempered with virtue. Yet others wonder if Plato was drawing upon fragments of genuine memory, echoes of events carried down through oral tradition. Could he have preserved, however imperfectly, the memory of a real catastrophe at the end of the Ice Age? For Plato gives us a date, 9,000 years before Solon. That places Atlantis around 9600 BCE, a time when the world truly was undergoing dramatic upheaval. The end of the Younger Dryas cold period, when glaciers melted, seas rose, and vast floods swept across continents. This coincidence of timing is what draws many to believe that Plato's account may have been more than allegory, that it might be a distorted memory of real events passed through generations of Egyptian priests before reaching Greek ears. But where was Atlantis? Plato insists it lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles. Some point to the Azores in the mid-Atlantic, others to the Caribbean, others still to the coast of Spain or Morocco. Some see it in the island of Santorini, once home to the great Minoan civilization, destroyed in a volcanic cataclysm around 1600 BCE. Others propose the Riche structure in the Sahara, a massive ring-shaped formation that eerily resembles Plato's description of concentric canals. Yet none of these candidates perfectly fit the story. Each holds pieces, fragments, hints, but never the whole. And so the search continues. The fascination with Atlantis is not only about geography or archaeology, it is about what the story represents. A great civilization destroyed in a single night, a golden age swallowed by the sea. It resonates because it speaks to our deepest fears and longings. The fear that what we build can vanish without warning. The longing for a paradise we have lost, a perfection we might one day recover. This is why Atlantis endures. Not because we are certain it existed, but because we are certain that its meaning speaks to us. Plato's dialogues also highlight the fragility of memory. He admits that the story is second-hand, passed from priests to Solon, from Solon to others, and finally to himself. Each retelling distorts, reshapes, and reframes. What we are left with is not a chronicle, but a myth, one shaped by both memory and imagination. Yet even myths may carry kernels of truth. Just as Troy was once thought a fable until Schliemann uncovered its ruins. Just as Dwarka was once dismissed until divers found its walls beneath the sea. Atlantis may live somewhere between memory and metaphor, neither fully history nor fully fantasy. This ambiguity is what makes the story so powerful. Atlantis is both everywhere and nowhere. It can be mapped onto the Azores, onto Santorini, onto Antarctica itself, and yet it also floats in the realm of story, an archetype more than a location. The archetype of the lost world, the fallen paradise, the civilization undone by its own excess. Each culture finds in it what it most needs. For Renaissance thinkers, Atlantis was a model of utopia, a place of enlightened science and perfect order. For mystics, it became the source of hidden wisdom and esoteric teachings. For explorers, it was the dream of discovery waiting just beyond the horizon. Perhaps the true meaning of Atlantis lies not in whether it existed, but in why we keep searching for it. The search itself reveals our hunger for meaning, our desire to believe that greatness is not limited to the present, that others before us reached heights equal to or beyond our own, and that even in destruction, knowledge and wisdom can survive in fragments, waiting to be rediscovered. Atlantis is less a place than a mirror, reflecting our fears of collapse, our hopes for renewal, and our endless fascination with the unknown. And so, as we close this chapter, Atlantis remains both a cautionary tale and an invitation, a warning that hubris brings downfall, but also a beacon, reminding us that myths are worth listening to, not as lies, not as literal truth, but as echoes of memory, echoes that speak across centuries, carried in the rhythm of story, reminding us that civilizations rise, fall, and vanish, and that perhaps beneath the waves or beneath the sands, fragments of their memory still wait to be found. Across the world, in lands separated by oceans and centuries, one story repeats itself. It is the story of the flood. Vast waters rising, swallowing villages, drowning fields, and sweeping away entire peoples. It appears in Mesopotamia with the tale of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It surfaces again in the story of Noah, chosen to build an ark when the world was consumed by waters. In India, Manu is warned by a great fish to prepare for a flood that would cover the earth. In China, Yu the Great labors for years to tame the waters and carve channels that would save his people. In Mesoamerica, traditions tell of suns and worlds destroyed by deluges, forcing survivors to climb mountains or trees. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples remember the sea advancing inland, drowning coasts, reshaping the land. These are not isolated tales. They are a chorus repeating across continents. Humanity remembering a time when the seas rose higher than anyone thought possible. The question is why? Why would so many cultures invent such a story unless it preserved something real? Scholars once argued that flood myths were simple allegories, symbols of renewal or punishment. But geological evidence suggests there may be more to them. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, the Earth's climate shifted dramatically. Glaciers melted, rivers swelled, seas surged. During the event known as the Younger Dryas, temperatures fluctuated wildly, ice sheets collapsed, and vast floods tore across the continents. Meltwater pulses raised sea levels by hundreds of feet in only a few centuries. Entire coastlines vanished. Islands were submerged. Valleys became seas. For people living through these changes, it must have felt like the world itself was ending. And when the survivors told their children, and their children told theirs, the memory became myth. Consider Mesopotamia, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates were prone to sudden flooding. Archaeological layers near Shuruppak and Ur show evidence of catastrophic inundations. The Sumerians turned these disasters into the legend of Ziusudra, the man who survived by building a vessel. The Babylonians later retold it in the story of Utnapishtim. The Hebrews absorbed it into the story of Noah. Each version changes details, but the heart of the story is the same. A flood came. Humanity nearly perished. A chosen one preserved life through preparation and divine warning. What begins as memory becomes narrative, becomes scripture, becomes myth. And yet beneath the layers of interpretation lies the real memory of rivers overflowing and cities being washed away. Far from Mesopotamia, similar echoes appear. The Greek story of Deucalion and Pyrrha describes a deluge sent by Zeus, leaving only a handful of survivors who repopulated the world. The Aztecs tell of the fourth sun, destroyed by water, forcing people to survive as fish before a new age began. Polynesian traditions recall ancestral islands swallowed by the sea, memories perhaps of the migration from Hawaii, a homeland lost beneath the waves. In West Africa, Yoruba stories speak of drowned cities beneath rivers, while in North America, the Hopi recount emerging from underground after a great flood ended an earlier world. Australian Aboriginal peoples, with oral traditions stretching back tens of thousands of years, describe the sea rising to cover once inhabited coasts. Modern science has confirmed that sea levels did indeed rise dramatically after the Ice Age, flooding continental shelves and changing the map of the Earth forever. Myths, it seems, are memory written in story form. But floods are not only natural disasters. In myth, they are also lessons. They remind us of fragility. They warn us against arrogance. They teach us that survival depends on foresight and humility. The flood myth always contains a moral core. The chosen one who builds the ark, the wise leader who guides his people to high ground, the gods who punish corruption with water. These elements are not arbitrary. They encode the survival strategies of our ancestors. Watch the rivers, respect the seas, prepare for the storm. They are not just tales of catastrophe, but instructions wrapped in symbol, lessons passed down across millennia. Stories that ensured survival by warning the next generation of what could happen again. And so, when we listen to flood myths today, we are hearing both memory and metaphor. Memory of real floods that reshaped the world at the end of the Ice Age. And metaphor, reminding us that civilization is fragile, that arrogance invites downfall, that renewal is always possible after destruction. They resonate because they are both history and dream. Science confirms the rising seas, the melted glaciers, the drowned coastlines. Myth preserves the human experience of living through them. Together they give us not only facts but meaning. The global flood is not a single event, but a shared memory of vulnerability carried across cultures. And perhaps that is why it endures. Because deep inside, we know the waters can always rise again. 12,000 years ago, the world stood at the edge of transformation. The long grip of the Ice Age, which had held continents in frost and oceans in restraint, began to loosen. Massive glaciers, miles thick, had dominated the northern hemisphere for tens of thousands of years. They carved valleys, they dammed rivers, they pressed the earth beneath their weight. But as the climate shifted, the ice began to melt, slowly at first, then in sudden catastrophic bursts. Sea levels rose with terrifying speed. Landscapes familiar to generations disappeared beneath the waves. Whole ecosystems collapsed and reformed. For the people who lived through this, it was as if the earth itself was alive and restless, reshaping the map of the world before their eyes. The Younger Dryas, a sudden and mysterious cooling event, marked one of the most dramatic chapters of this transition. Just as the earth seemed to be warming, global temperatures plunged back into near-glacial conditions. Crops withered, herds dwindled, communities already fragile were forced into new migrations. Some scientists suggest that this cooling may have been triggered by a comet impact or by massive meltwater flows disrupting ocean currents. Whatever the cause, the result was chaos. When warmth finally returned, the ice sheets collapsed in violent pulses. Seas rose as much as 20 feet within a single human lifetime. Entire coastlines vanished. Islands were swallowed. Rivers carved new paths. The survivors, stunned and frightened, carried forward memories of water swallowing the world, memories that later became myths of floods and lost lands. Archaeological evidence shows that this period was one of both destruction and renewal. Some human groups vanished entirely, others adapted, inventing new ways of living in a changing environment. In fertile regions, the sudden abundance created by floods and rich soils gave rise to agriculture. Places like the Fertile Crescent transformed from hunting grounds into farmlands. Villages formed, then cities, then civilizations. Yet beneath this story of progress is another story of what was lost. Entire continental shelves that had once been habitable land now lie beneath the sea. The coastlines of that world are gone forever. If humans built settlements there, and there is every reason to believe they did, those places are now drowned, erased except for fragments that divers and sonar may one day uncover. Consider the Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia, once a vast subcontinent connecting islands into a single landmass. As seas rose, this world broke apart, leaving behind the archipelagos of Indonesia and the Philippines. In the Mediterranean, rising waters flooded fertile plains and turned river valleys into gulfs and bays. In the Americas, glaciers receded, creating great inland seas and reshaping entire landscapes. Each region experienced its own upheaval, but the pattern was global. Land became water. Homes became seabeds. Migration was not a choice, but a necessity. Cultures were scattered, broken, and reborn in new forms. It is little wonder that almost every culture remembers a time when the earth was drowned and remade. The end of the Ice Age was not only about rising seas, but also about fire and stone. As ice sheets retreated, pressure on the crust shifted. Volcanoes erupted. Earthquakes shook lands long held in frozen stillness. Massive torrents known as outburst floods burst from melting glacial lakes, scouring valleys and sweeping boulders the size of houses across plains. The scablands of North America, with their dry riverbeds and giant ripple marks, still bear the scars of these cataclysms. For those alive at the time, these were not geological processes, but apocalyptic events. The sky darkened. The earth shook. The seas rose. To endure was to survive trauma so immense that it had to be remembered in story, encoded in myth, passed down as warning and memory. And yet, in the shadow of destruction, humanity persisted. The chaos of the Ice Age's end forced adaptation, invention, and resilience. From the ashes of drowned coasts and broken landscapes, new civilizations eventually rose. But they carried with them memories of what had been lost, memories of a world reshaped by forces beyond human control. These memories survived as myths of Atlantis, of sunken lands, of golden ages destroyed by flood and fire. They were not fantasies, but echoes of real upheavals at the dawn of our present age. Today, as science confirms the violence of that transition, we can hear the voices of our ancestors whispering through myth. The end of the Ice Age was not only a geological event, it was a human story, remembered in stone, in story, in silence. A reminder that the world can change swiftly and that what feels eternal may vanish in a single lifetime. Beneath the oceans, hidden under layers of silt, coral, and darkness, lie whispers of forgotten worlds. The sea conceals more than it reveals. More than 80% of the seafloor remains unmapped in high resolution, leaving vast spaces where the past may still sleep. If entire coastlines were swallowed at the end of the Ice Age, then the traces of human settlement must surely lie there, drowned and preserved in silence. And indeed, divers, fishermen, and explorers have occasionally stumbled upon mysteries that seem to hint at civilizations now lost. Some are dismissed as natural formations, others embraced as proof of forgotten cultures. But all share one quality. They remind us that the ocean is not only a barrier, but a vault that holds fragments of memory waiting to be discovered. One of the most famous examples lies off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument. In 1986, a diver exploring near the island of Yonaguni stumbled upon what appeared to be vast stone terraces beneath the waves. Steps rose in geometric patterns, platforms stretched in straight lines, pillars seemed to stand like guardians in the deep. Some geologists argue it is natural, the result of sandstone fracturing along straight lines. Others insist the regularity suggests human hands. Roads, plazas, staircases, even what appears to be a stage or ceremonial platform have been mapped. If it is natural, it is a natural wonder. If it is human, it could date back to a time when sea levels were lower, more than 10,000 years ago. A time that aligns with the legends of Mu, the lost Pacific continent. Further west, along the coast of India, another mystery lies beneath the waves: Dwarka. In Hindu tradition, Dwarka was the legendary city of Krishna, built of shining walls and temples, only to be swallowed by the sea after his death. For centuries, it was considered a myth, a story of divine glory and loss. Yet in the early 2000s, marine archaeologists discovered stone structures beneath the Gulf of Kambat, some extending for miles. Streets and walls, carved blocks and geometric alignments suggested something more than mere chance. Carbon dating of materials pulled from the seabed suggested great antiquity, though debate remains fierce. Some scholars warn of misinterpretation, of artifacts pulled from riverbeds rather than a coherent city. Yet the parallels with myth are striking. A city remembered in story, hidden beneath the waves, rediscovered in fragments. The Mediterranean, too, holds its secrets. Off the coast of Greece lies Pavlopetri, considered the world's oldest known submerged city. Dated to around 5,000 years ago, it shows streets, buildings, courtyards, and a planned urban layout beneath just a few meters of water. Unlike Yonaguni or Dwarka, there is no doubt about its human origin. Here, the sea has simply preserved what earthquakes and waves destroyed. Nearby, the city of Helike was swallowed overnight by an earthquake and tsunami in 373 BCE, its story surviving in Greek accounts until archaeologists rediscovered its remains in the 1990s. And in Egypt, the great trading city of Thonis Herakleion, once thought a legend, was uncovered beneath the Mediterranean, its colossal statues and temples buried in silt for more than 1,000 years. Each rediscovery reminds us that myth and history are never as far apart as we imagine. Across the Atlantic, the Bahamas have long been a magnet for speculation. There, divers found what is called the Bimini Road, a line of massive stone blocks stretching beneath the shallow waters near Bimini Island. Some see it as a harbour wall or a road, proof of a lost civilization. Others dismiss it as a natural beach rock formation fractured by the sea. The debate continues, as it does with so many underwater mysteries. Yet the allure remains strong, for the Bimini discovery seemed to coincide with predictions made by the famous psychic Edgar Cayce, who claimed Atlantis would rise again near the Bahamas. Whether coincidence or synchronicity, the site fuels the imagination, keeping alive the belief that somewhere under the Atlantic waves, Atlantis itself may rest. What unites all these sites is not certainty, but possibility. The sea erases, but it also preserves. Wood rots, but stone endures. When we peer beneath the waves, we are not only looking for cities, we are looking for memory. Memory of lands that once stood above water, of communities that thrived before floods came, of civilizations erased not by conquest, but by the sea itself. Science may argue over dates, geology may debate natural versus human origins, but the emotional truth is undeniable. When we find a wall beneath the ocean, when we trace the lines of a drowned street, we feel the presence of those who walked there. The ocean whispers that our world is fragile, that what is dry today may drown tomorrow, and that perhaps, in the silence of the deep, the ruins of forgotten ages still wait. High on a hill in southeastern Turkey lies a site that has rewritten history. It is called Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill, a mound that for centuries seemed nothing more than a rise in the earth. Yet beneath that mound, beginning in the 1990s, archaeologists uncovered something astonishing. Massive stone pillars arranged in circles, some weighing as much as 20 tons, each carved with images of animals, foxes, lions, vultures, serpents, etched with a skill that defied expectation. The site was not a village, not a farm, not a settlement. It was a sanctuary, a place of ritual and gathering built more than 11,000 years ago, long before Stonehenge, long before the pyramids. It was a discovery that forced us to rethink the timeline of civilization. For decades, the story of human progress was told in a straight line. First came agriculture, then villages, then cities, then monuments and temples. The logic was simple. Only once people had stable food supplies and social organization could they build great works. Yet Göbekli Tepe shattered this assumption. Here was monumental architecture not after farming but before it. Hunter-gatherers, long thought incapable of such feats, had come together to raise colossal stones, to carve intricate reliefs, to design complex ritual spaces. The site dates to around 9600 BCE, the very dawn of the Holocene. It suggests that religion, myth, and ritual may not have been byproducts of civilization. They may have been the spark that ignited it. The scale of Göbekli Tepe is staggering. Dozens of stone circles are buried beneath the hill, many still unexcavated. Each circle is anchored by two towering T-shaped pillars, thought to represent human forms, their arms carved along their sides, their hands clasped at the front. Around them stand smaller pillars, decorated with animals and abstract symbols. The imagery speaks of a symbolic world, a mythology carved into stone. Some see it as a place of ancestor worship, others as a temple to the cosmos, a calendar of stars and seasons. Whatever its exact purpose, it reveals that early humans carried within them not only survival skills but imagination, creativity, and a longing for meaning. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not primitives. They were visionaries. Perhaps the most mysterious element is that Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Around 8000 BCE, after centuries of use, its circles were carefully filled with earth and stone, entombed like a memory hidden for the future. Why would people who labored so greatly to build such monuments then choose to conceal them? Some suggest it was an act of reverence, preserving sacred spaces for eternity. Others imagine it as a ritual of closure, a farewell to an age now passing. The deliberate burial preserved the site, allowing it to reach us intact thousands of years later. It is as though the builders themselves wanted their memory to be carried forward, even if their names and stories were lost. The stones speak where their voices cannot. Göbekli Tepe also resonates with myths of lost golden ages. Plato wrote of Atlantis, a world of wisdom destroyed at the dawn of our era. Other cultures remember times when gods walked among humans, when knowledge was greater than in later ages. Could Göbekli Tepe be a remnant of such a memory? It does not prove Atlantis, yet its existence shows that humanity was capable of unexpected complexity far earlier than scholars believed. It aligns uncannily with the date Plato gave for Atlantis, around 9600 BCE. Was Plato echoing a memory of sites like this, preserved in oral tradition across millennia? We cannot say with certainty, but Göbekli Tepe reminds us that myths may not be pure invention. They may crystallize around truths forgotten by history but preserved in stone. Today, Göbekli Tepe stands as both revelation and mystery. It reveals that humanity's past is deeper and stranger than we thought. It reminds us that the story of civilization is not a simple ladder but a tapestry of forgotten chapters. And it leaves us with questions still unanswered. Who organized the labor to quarry and raise these stones? What rituals filled these circles with meaning? Why bury them when they still stood strong? Each discovery at the site adds detail, yet also deepens the mystery. Göbekli Tepe is not only an archaeological wonder, it is a whisper from the dawn of time. A reminder that even at the end of the Ice Age, humans were already reaching for the sacred, already shaping myth into monument, already leaving behind echoes for us to find. Few places on earth capture the imagination like Egypt, the land of the Nile, where desert sands stretch endlessly and the river runs like a silver thread through time. Here stand monuments that defy explanation. The pyramids, the Sphinx, the temples of Karnak and Luxor, structures so massive, so precise, so enduring that they seem almost outside of time. For thousands of years, people have gazed upon them and wondered, who built them? How did they achieve such scale and perfection with tools that seem primitive by today's measure? And why do these monuments align so precisely with stars, solstices, and cardinal directions? Egypt's enigmas are not only about stone and sand, they are about memory. They are about the possibility that something greater once lived at the dawn of civilization. The Great Pyramid of Giza is perhaps the most astonishing of all. Rising more than 450 feet into the sky, built with over 2 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as 70 tons. For centuries, scholars accepted that it was constructed during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu around 2500 BCE. Yet questions remain. The precision of its alignment with true north is unmatched even in modern architecture. The base is level within fractions of an inch. The shafts within the pyramid point towards specific stars, as though the builders sought to connect earth and sky. Some see in this a mastery of astronomy and engineering that feels far beyond its age. Others suggest that the pyramid may preserve older knowledge inherited from a forgotten source. Whatever the truth, it stands not only as a tomb, but as a riddle carved in stone. Beside the pyramids lies the Sphinx, half lion, half human, staring eternally toward the rising sun. Its weathered face, eroded body, and immense scale have long puzzled researchers. Some geologists argue that the erosion patterns on its surface suggest rainfall, not wind or sand. Rainfall that would date its carving thousands of years earlier than dynastic Egypt, to a time when the Sahara was green. If true, this would rewrite history, placing the Sphinx in a forgotten era, older than any known pharaoh. Mainstream Egyptology resists such claims, warning against speculation and pseudo-history. Yet the whispers persist. Could the Sphinx be a relic of an earlier civilization, adopted and recarved by later dynasties? Its silent gaze offers no answers, only mystery. The temples of Egypt add further intrigue. Karnak, Luxor, Abydos. Structures of colossal columns and massive stones, some carved with exquisite hieroglyphs, others marked with images whose meaning remains elusive. At Abydos, an inscription seems to depict machines that resemble modern technology. At Dendera, the so-called light bulb carvings have inspired endless speculation. Were these purely symbolic, or do they preserve echoes of knowledge we no longer understand? Even if one dismisses such interpretations, the engineering marvel remains. Obelisks weighing hundreds of tons were quarried, transported, and raised with methods still debated today. The knowledge required was immense, the precision breathtaking. It is as though Egypt was not simply building for its own time, but to send messages across millennia, messages carved into eternity. Egypt is also rich in myth, and its myths often intertwine with its monuments. The god Osiris, lord of the underworld, is said to have been entombed in fragments across the land. The temple at Abydos was believed to hold his head. The pyramids themselves were called Mer, places of ascension, gateways to the stars. The ancient Egyptians spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age when gods walked among humans and knowledge flowed freely. Some suggest that the monuments are echoes of this mythic memory, built as reflections of structures even older, perhaps lost in flood or fire. If so, then Egypt's enigmas are not merely about history. They are about continuity, about a civilization preserving fragments of an inheritance from an earlier world. What makes Egypt so haunting is the silence of its stones. The pyramids do not explain themselves. The Sphinx does not reveal its age. The hieroglyphs speak, but often in riddles, leaving scholars to debate their meaning for generations. And yet, in that silence, there is power. These monuments endure not only as relics, but as invitations. They invite us to wonder, to question, to imagine that the story of humanity is deeper and stranger than we are taught. Egypt's enigmas remind us that history is not settled, that myths may contain fragments of truth, and that the past may still hold secrets waiting to be uncovered. To stand before the Great Pyramid or to look into the eyes of the Sphinx is to feel time collapse. Past and present merge, and we hear the same question echoing across centuries. Who built these wonders, and what forgotten memory did they hope to preserve? Deep within the mountains of Asia, legends whisper of hidden kingdoms, realms untouched by time and unseen by ordinary eyes. Shambhala, Agartha, names that sound like echoes of dreams, yet have persisted across centuries and cultures. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Shambhala is described as a pure land, a hidden valley where wisdom, compassion, and enlightenment thrive. It is not only a place but a state of being, a promise that harmony and truth are preserved somewhere, even as the outer world falls into chaos. Agartha, by contrast, is spoken of as an underground realm, a vast network of subterranean cities linked by tunnels beneath the earth. In this vision, civilizations survive in secret, guided by masters who guard knowledge too powerful for the surface world. Though different in form, both myths share a theme that wisdom endures, hidden away, waiting for humanity to be ready. The myth of Shambhala arises from sacred texts like the Kalachakra Tantra. It speaks of a land where kings are philosophers, where people live in peace, and where the final battle between light and darkness will one day be fought. To Tibetan Buddhists, Shambhala is not only a hidden kingdom, but a symbol of inner awakening. Pilgrims have searched for it in valleys of the Himalayas, believing its gates might open to the pure of heart. Western explorers in the 19th and 20th centuries carried these tales back, weaving them into the fascination with lost worlds that swept across Europe. In their hands, Shambhala became not only a spiritual refuge, but a physical mystery, a kingdom concealed in snow and stone waiting to be found. The blending of faith, myth, and geography gave Shambhala a place in both religion and imagination, where it remains to this day. Agartha, however, belongs more to esoteric and occult traditions. Its origins are harder to trace, woven from Hindu myths of underground realms, Buddhist stories of hidden worlds, and Western fascination with the idea of a hollow earth. In the 19th century, writers began to speak of tunnels stretching beneath the Himalayas, leading to a subterranean kingdom where enlightened masters ruled in secrecy. Agartha was said to be illuminated by a hidden inner sun, its people technologically advanced and spiritually superior. Some accounts linked it to survivors of ancient cataclysms, civilizations that retreated below to escape floods, fires, or cosmic disasters. From there, they would watch and occasionally intervene, guiding surface humanity in subtle ways. Whether seen as a literal place or a metaphor for hidden wisdom, Agartha became part of a larger narrative that not all of history is visible on the surface. Both Shambhala and Agartha gained new life in the modern era. Theosophists, mystics, and later conspiracy theorists embraced them as evidence of hidden truths. Helena Blavatsky spoke of secret masters dwelling in hidden places, shaping the evolution of human consciousness. Later, explorers and adventurers wove tales of expeditions seeking these realms. Some linked Shambhala to Central Asia, others to Tibet, Mongolia, or even the far reaches of the Arctic. Agartha became tied to theories of hollow earth, Nazi occultism, and fantasies of hidden super-civilizations. While mainstream scholarship dismisses such ideas as speculation, their persistence reveals something deeper. They tap into the longing that wisdom and hope survive somewhere, even when the surface world seems lost to corruption and decay. These myths endure because they answer a universal desire, that knowledge is not gone forever, but hidden, preserved in secret places. Symbolically, Shambhala and Agartha are mirrors of human fear and hope. Shambhala reflects the yearning for a world of peace, a golden age that is still possible, awaiting the right time to emerge. Agartha reflects the instinct for survival, the belief that in times of catastrophe, some remnant of humanity withdraws underground, carrying forward what would otherwise be lost. In both cases, the myth assures us that wisdom does not vanish. It retreats, it hides, it bides its time. This is why these stories feel so alive today. In an age of environmental crisis, political turmoil, and spiritual searching, the idea that somewhere knowledge endures is deeply comforting. Whether hidden in the snows of Tibet or beneath the mountains of the earth, Shambhala and Agartha embody resilience. They are less about geography than psychology, less about where they are and more about what they mean. When we listen to these myths in a quiet moment, we hear their soothing rhythm. They remind us that humanity has always imagined safe places, sanctuaries where wisdom could be preserved against time and disaster. Perhaps there are real valleys in the Himalayas that inspired Shambhala. Perhaps there are caves or tunnels that gave birth to stories of Agartha. Or perhaps they exist only as metaphors, inner landscapes of the mind and spirit. Either way, they continue to inspire pilgrims, dreamers, and seekers, reminding us that even when the world feels fragile, wisdom endures in hidden forms. Shambhala and Agartha may never be found on a map, but they live within the imagination. They are promises carved in story, lanterns of myth that guide us toward the possibility that something greater waits just beyond sight. Long before Europeans set foot in the Americas, vast civilizations thrived across forests, mountains, and plains. They built cities of stone and earth, networks of roads, and temples that touched the sky. Yet when the first explorers arrived, they often found only ruins, abandoned plazas, or entire cities swallowed by jungle. The Maya, the Aztec, the Inca, names we know today, were only fragments of a much larger story. For beyond the great empires remembered in textbooks, countless other cities once flourished, now forgotten by time. The Americas were not a wilderness waiting to be discovered. They were already alive with memory, with ingenuity, with societies that rose, thrived, and vanished. Each ruin, each mound, each carving in stone is a whisper of those lost worlds. They remind us that history is not as empty as we once imagined. The Maya world offers some of the most striking examples. In the jungles of Guatemala, Belize, and Mexico lie cities once home to tens of thousands of people. Tikal, with its towering pyramids, rose like a forest of stone among the trees. Palenque, Copan, Calakmul, each a center of learning, art, and ritual. For centuries, these cities were hidden, reclaimed by vines and roots, until explorers stumbled upon them in the 19th century. Today, new technologies like LiDAR scanning have revealed the scale of what lies beneath the canopy. Entire networks of roads, canals, terraces, and cities interconnected across vast landscapes. The Maya world was not a scattering of villages, it was a civilization of astonishing complexity. And yet, by the time the Spanish arrived, many of its cities had already been abandoned, leaving only silence and stone. Further south, in the Andean world, the Inca are remembered as empire builders, masters of mountains and stone. Cusco, their capital, still carries the imprint of their mastery. Machu Picchu, perched high among the clouds, is perhaps the most iconic of their achievements. Its terraces, temples, and astronomical alignments speak of a civilization deeply attuned to its environment. But the Inca were not alone. Long before them, cultures like the Tiwanaku built monumental centers on the shores of Lake Titicaca. Massive stone blocks, intricately carved, lie scattered as if by giants. Their purpose remains debated, their origins shrouded in myth. The Nazca, further west, etched vast geoglyphs into the desert, lines so large they can only be seen from the sky. These forgotten cities and cultures remind us that the Andes were not simply a backdrop for empire, they were a crucible of innovation and mystery. In North America too, great cities once thrived. Along the Mississippi River, Cahokia rose around 1000 CE, a metropolis of earth mounds, plazas, and wooden temples. At its height, it rivaled London in size, yet few outside of scholars know its name. Its central mound, Monk's Mound, still towers above the landscape, a reminder of its grandeur. Across the continent, the ancestral Puebloans built vast cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon, astronomical alignments carved into stone and wood. These were not small tribal camps, but planned communities, organized societies with knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and trade. Yet they too were abandoned, their people dispersing into new forms, leaving the ruins to whisper their stories to the wind. What unites these forgotten cities is not only their grandeur, but their mystery. Why were they abandoned? Some fell to droughts and climate shifts, others to conflict, disease, or political collapse. Still others simply shifted as people moved, leaving monuments behind. To later generations, the ruins became places of legend. To the Maya, abandoned cities were inhabited by gods and spirits. To the Inca, Tiwanaku was built by giants in a forgotten age. To the Spanish, the stories of golden cities like El Dorado fueled endless quests for wealth and wonder. These myths, born from ruins, carried fragments of truth that great civilizations had once existed but were gone, leaving only traces for future seekers to find. Today, the Americas' forgotten cities remind us of resilience and fragility alike. They show us that civilizations can rise to astonishing heights, only to vanish into memory. They show us that the land is layered with stories, that beneath the soil and the jungle lie chapters of history not yet told. Technologies like LiDAR continue to reveal entire cities hidden in plain sight, proving that our understanding of the past is still incomplete. Each discovery humbles us, reminding us that the people of the Americas were not wandering tribes awaiting conquest, but builders, thinkers, and dreamers. Their forgotten cities are not only relics of the past, they are mirrors for us today. whispering that all empires, no matter how great, can one day be reclaimed by silence. The stones endure, the myths endure, and so too does the mystery. Civilizations are fragile things. They rise on ingenuity, trade, and belief, but they are vulnerable to forces beyond their control. The story of human history is filled not only with moments of triumph, but with sudden collapses. Earthquakes shatter temples, volcanoes bury cities in ash, droughts turn fertile fields into deserts, floods erase coastlines and scatter peoples who once thrived along the shore. To those who lived through these events, they must have felt like the end of the world, and perhaps, in a sense, they were. Not the end of humanity, but the end of entire ways of life. What remains are ruins, myths, and echoes carried forward in story. Catastrophe has always been both destroyer and storyteller. Consider the island of Santorini, once known as Thera. Around 1600 BCE, a colossal volcanic eruption tore it apart. Ash and pumice rained down across the Aegean, tsunamis surged toward Crete, and the sky itself darkened. Entire cities were buried, their frescoes and pottery preserved under layers of ash. Some believe this eruption contributed to the decline of the Minoan civilization, a culture of great seafarers whose influence stretched across the Mediterranean. To later generations, the memory of islands swallowed by sea and fire became woven into myths of Atlantis. The eruption of Thera is not merely a geological event. It is a reminder that a single day of violence can undo centuries of progress. Pompeii and Herculaneum offer another haunting example. In 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted with fury, burying both cities under meters of ash and volcanic stone. Thousands perished in an instant, their forms preserved in chilling casts. Yet in their destruction, they were also preserved. Streets, homes, paintings, even loaves of bread survived, offering us a frozen glimpse into Roman life. Pompeii teaches us that catastrophe does not erase everything. Sometimes it seals memory into stone, carrying it forward for future generations. To walk its silent streets today is to feel the moment of collapse lingering, as though time itself paused at the edge of disaster. Beyond volcanic fury, climate has undone civilizations as well. The collapse of the classic Maya around the 9th century CE is often linked to centuries of drought. Without rain, cities dependent on reservoirs and crops could no longer sustain their populations. People abandoned once great centers like Tikal and Copan, dispersing into smaller communities. Similarly, the ancestral Puebloans of Chaco Canyon left their monumental kivas and cliff dwellings, likely driven by cycles of drought and conflict. Even the Akkadian Empire, among the earliest in Mesopotamia, is thought to have fallen after a period of severe aridity around 2200 BCE. Climate does not strike with a single blow. It erodes resilience slowly until even mighty empires crumble into silence. Floods, too, have left their mark. Legends of deluge appear across cultures, from Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh to the story of Noah to flood myths of Native American, African, and Pacific peoples. Modern science shows that at the end of the Ice Age, rising seas and catastrophic meltwater floods transformed the world. Coastlines vanished, fertile plains were drowned, and survivors carried the memory of these events forward in myth. The Black Sea flood hypothesis, for example, suggests that around 5600 BCE, the Mediterranean surged into the Black Sea basin, displacing entire populations. Whether this specific event occurred or not, the pattern is clear. Floods reshape history. They erase what was familiar and force humanity into new migrations, leaving behind stories of worlds swallowed whole. What unites all these catastrophes is their dual nature. They destroy, but they also preserve. They erase cities, but they seed myths. They remind us that progress is fragile, yet they ensure that memory, in some form, endures. Civilizations collapse, but stories of their fall ripple across time, carried in oral traditions, in ruins, in the silence of abandoned streets. Catastrophe is both an ending and a beginning. For those who survive, it demands resilience and reinvention. For those who come after, it offers caution, a reminder that the world is never as stable as it seems. To study collapse is not to despair, but to recognize the cycle. We build, we fall, we remember. And in the remembering, we keep alive the fragile thread of humanity that binds us across ages. For every legend of a lost civilization, there are two kinds of voices that rise in response: the skeptics who demand proof, evidence, and reason, and the believers who see in myth and mystery echoes of truths that science has not yet uncovered. This tension has shaped the entire conversation about lost worlds. To the skeptic, Atlantis is a fable, Mu and Lemuria inventions, Shambhala a metaphor. To the believer, they are memories, fragments of a forgotten past, waiting for validation. Neither side is entirely wrong. For myths often grow from kernels of truth, and yet imagination can easily wander into fantasy. Between them lies the fragile frontier of discovery, a place where caution and curiosity must learn to coexist. Skeptics remind us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They point to geology, archaeology, and carbon dating. They warn against confirmation bias, against seeing patterns where none exist. To them, the Yonaguni monument is fractured sandstone, the Bimini Road a natural formation, the tales of Mu nothing more than colonial speculation. They argue that human imagination has always created golden ages and catastrophes to explain the unknown. Without rigorous evidence, they say, myth remains story, not history, and they are right to be cautious. For history must be built on foundations stronger than speculation. Without skepticism, we risk mistaking dreams for truths and falling into the traps of pseudoscience and fantasy. Believers, however, offer another perspective. They remind us that many once dismissed myths have proven true. Troy, once thought a legend of Homer's imagination, was unearthed in the soil of Turkey. The great city of Dwarka, sung of in Hindu texts, has revealed structures beneath the waves of India's coast. Pompeii, too, was a tale preserved until ash gave up its secrets. To the believer, myths endure for a reason. They are not arbitrary stories, but fragments of memory encoded in song, ritual, and legend. They suggest that ancient voices carried warnings forward and that we dismiss them too easily at our peril. Believers argue that we must keep our minds open, for sometimes the stones whisper truths that textbooks have not yet heard. The divide between skeptics and believers is not always absolute. Many archaeologists walk a delicate line, acknowledging the symbolic power of myth while insisting on the discipline of evidence. They may accept that flood stories reflect real post-Ice Age sea level rise, but stop short of affirming Atlantis. They may see astronomical alignments in pyramids and temples, but hesitate to call them proof of lost wisdom. This middle ground is perhaps the most fertile. It allows myth to inspire questions while requiring science to test the answers. In this balance, skepticism keeps imagination grounded, while belief keeps curiosity alive. Together they create a dialogue that continues to shape our understanding of the past. The human heart, however, often leans toward belief. We want to imagine that something greater once existed, that Atlantis was real, that golden ages were true, that hidden wisdom waits in secret places. Skepticism may satisfy the mind, but belief satisfies the soul. Myths endure because they give meaning, not only facts. They speak to our fears and hopes, to the fragility of civilization and the dream of its rebirth. Even in the modern world, filled with satellites and supercomputers, people still flock to books, films, and videos about lost civilizations. The skeptic may shake their head, but the believer feels wonder. And in that wonder lies something essential: the willingness to keep searching, to keep asking, to keep imagining. Perhaps the truth lies not entirely with one side or the other. The skeptics remind us that without discipline, we risk illusion. The believers remind us that without imagination, we risk blindness. Myths of lost civilizations may never be proven in the way science demands, yet they continue to shape our questions, to guide our eyes toward mysteries we might otherwise ignore. The tension between skeptics and believers is not a battle to be won. It is a conversation to be carried forward, a dance between reason and wonder, fact and faith, and perhaps it is in that very dance that humanity moves closer to truth. For in the end, both skeptics and believers are driven by the same quiet yearning: to understand where we came from, to know what we have lost, and to dream of what might still be waiting to be found. When we look at the ruins left by ancient civilizations, one question always lingers in the silence. How did they do it? How did people without iron tools, without modern machines, without cranes or engines, raise stones that weigh more than a house? How did they align temples with the solstices, pyramids with the stars, and cities with mathematical precision, the achievements of the ancients seem to whisper of knowledge we struggle to comprehend. To skeptics, the answer lies in ingenuity, persistence, and human hands working together over generations. To believers, it hints at something more: forgotten technologies, lost sciences, perhaps even wisdom passed down from civilizations that existed before the ones we know. The ruins do not answer directly. They only invite us to wonder. Consider the megaliths of Baalbek in Lebanon. Massive stone blocks, some weighing over 1,000 tons, lie stacked as part of a Roman temple complex, but the platform beneath them appears far older. The so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman still rests half-quarried, its size so immense that modern cranes would struggle to move it. How could ancient builders transport such blocks over uneven terrain, lift them into place, and align them with precision? Explanations vary: ramps, levers, immense teams of workers. Yet the scale continues to astonish, as though the builders commanded a technology or method we no longer understand. Baalbek is not alone. From Stonehenge to Tiwanaku, megalithic mysteries echo across the world. The pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica also reveal astonishing sophistication. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned with true north to within a fraction of a degree, its base level across 13 acres, its inner shafts pointing to key stars. In Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan rises in harmony with celestial cycles, while the Maya aligned their temples to cast shadows of serpents descending during equinoxes. These were not accidents. They were feats of astronomy and engineering blended seamlessly. The ancients read the skies like a clock, embedding cosmic rhythms into stone. To imagine them as primitive is to underestimate the depth of their science. They may not have had satellites or telescopes, but they possessed patience, precision, and a profound relationship with the heavens. Other technologies appear in subtler forms. The Nazca lines, etched into Peru's desert, stretch across miles of earth in shapes only visible from above. Some depict animals, others geometric patterns, their scale suggesting knowledge of surveying techniques that rival our own. In the Indus Valley, cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were laid out in grids with advanced drainage systems and standardized brick sizes, a level of planning rare even in later empires. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered off the coast of Greece, is a clockwork device from over 2,000 years ago, capable of predicting eclipses and celestial cycles with gears of extraordinary intricacy. Each of these discoveries forces us to pause. They remind us that ancient minds were not so different from ours. They too sought to measure, to design, to master time and nature. Legends also speak of technologies that have yet to be proven. In India's epics, flying machines called vimanas carry heroes across the skies, their descriptions resembling both chariots and aircraft. In Greek tales, Daedalus is said to have crafted wings, while Hephaestus built automatons of bronze that walked and guarded. In Andean myths, stones were moved by sound, lifted by chants and vibrations that softened them into place. To modern ears, these sound like fantasy, yet they may preserve symbolic memories of real techniques, methods that appear magical when remembered through myth. Even if the machines never existed, the stories remind us that technology has always been part of human imagination, blending reality and dream in ways that inspire future invention. What makes ancient technology so fascinating is the balance between what we know and what we do not. We can measure the stones, recreate possible ramps, model alignments with the stars. Yet there remains an aura of mystery, an unspoken suggestion that the ancients walked paths we no longer walk. Perhaps their greatest tool was not lost machines, but vision, the ability to dream at a scale so vast that mountains could be reshaped and stars written into stone. To stand before a pyramid, a megalith, or a city plan is to feel both humbled and inspired. The ancients remind us that knowledge is fragile, that techniques can be forgotten, and that progress is not always linear. Their ruins are not silent. They speak. They say, "Remember what humanity once achieved, and imagine what may yet be possible again." Beneath the waves, where sunlight fades into blue silence, mysteries rest in stillness. The ocean covers more than 2/3 of our planet, hiding secrets that may never fully be revealed. Among the most intriguing is Yonaguni, a site off the coast of Japan where divers discovered vast stone terraces and structures lying beneath the sea. Sharp edges, straight lines, and layered steps rise from the ocean floor, resembling temples or pyramids. Some say these formations are the remains of a lost civilization, drowned during the floods at the end of the Ice Age. Others insist they are natural, carved not by human hands but by geological processes. To swim among Yonaguni's stone shapes is to feel caught between science and myth. The sea whispers that answers may be buried far deeper than we imagine. Discovered in 1986 by a diver exploring the waters near Okinawa, the Yonaguni monument has sparked decades of debate. The site stretches across hundreds of feet with terraces, platforms, and even what appear to be staircases and roads. Its symmetry is striking. Some surfaces seem too flat, too precise to be accidental. Others bear what look like carvings, though erosion blurs their meaning. Supporters of the human-made theory suggest Yonaguni could be over 10,000 years old, a relic of a civilization lost when sea levels rose dramatically at the end of the last ice age. If true, it would rewrite history, placing advanced architecture thousands of years earlier than mainstream archaeology allows. Yet critics caution that sandstone fractures naturally into sharp lines, creating illusions of design where none exist. The mystery deepens because neither side holds definitive proof. Yonaguni is not alone in its enigma. Across the globe, underwater discoveries hint at forgotten worlds. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, divers uncovered stone walls and foundations submerged beneath the Arabian Sea. Legends spoke of Krishna's golden city, lost to the waves, and now echoes of that tale seem etched into the seafloor. In the Bahamas, the Bimini Road stretches across shallow waters, massive blocks forming a pathway that some call a harbour, others a natural formation. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar images reveal what appear to be pyramids and structures deep in the ocean, though access remains difficult. These sites, scattered and debated, remind us of how much land once lay above water. As glaciers melted and seas rose, entire coastlines vanished, taking with them the homes and stories of countless people. The possibility that ruins lie beneath the sea aligns with myth. Flood stories echo across cultures, describing lands swallowed by water, kingdoms drowned in a single night. Plato's Atlantis, the Polynesian homeland of Hawaii, the Irish Isle of High Brazil. Even the Aboriginal tales of Australia speak of rising waters transforming the land. Science too confirms that during the end of the Ice Age, seas rose by more than 400 feet, drowning vast stretches of coastal plains. Where millions once may have lived, now there is only silence, broken by the sound of waves and currents. If cities stood on those plains, their stones may rest now in darkness, hidden by silt, waiting for discovery. Yonaguni may be one such place, a doorway into that drowned prehistory. Whether natural or human-made, it speaks to the fragility of all civilizations facing the relentless rise of the sea. What makes underwater mysteries so haunting is their inaccessibility. The ocean resists exploration. Pressure crushes, light fades, currents obscure. Even with modern submersibles, mapping the seafloor remains a monumental task. More than 80% of the ocean floor is still unmapped at high resolution. In that vast unknown, countless sites may exist, never touched by human eyes. Technology is beginning to change this. Autonomous underwater drones sweep the depths with sonar. AI scans data for signs of geometry. Satellites trace hints of ancient shorelines. But the sea is patient. It keeps its secrets well. Yonaguni is a reminder that the greatest archive of lost civilizations may not be in deserts or jungles, but beneath the waves, and that perhaps the ocean holds more history than the land ever could. In the end, Yonaguni's mystery may never be resolved with certainty. For some, it will always be proof of a forgotten chapter in human history. For others, it will remain a fascinating example of nature's artistry. Yet the allure does not depend on final answers. It lies in the questions the site inspires. To drift over its stone terraces is to feel both awe and humility, to sense how much of our past is hidden, how fragile the record of civilization truly is. Perhaps Yonaguni is not Atlantis. Perhaps it is not even a city. But it is a reminder that the ocean is vast, that memory can drown, and that the world we know is only a fraction of the world that once was. Beneath the waves, silence holds its secrets. And we, ever curious, will keep searching, listening to the whispers of stone beneath the sea. In the shimmering desert of New Mexico, at a place called White Sands, the earth carries whispers older than history. Across the pale gypsum flats, researchers discovered footprints pressed deep into ancient soil. Not just the tracks of animals, but the clear impressions of human feet, some small, like those of children, others larger, steady strides left by adults. These footprints are extraordinary, for dating techniques suggest they are over 20,000 years old. If true, they rewrite the story of humanity in the Americas. For decades, scholars believed people arrived here no earlier than 13,000 years ago, guided by the Clovis culture. Yet the tracks at White Sands tell us a different tale. That long before the accepted timeline, humans walked this land, leaving marks in the soft earth that endured through ages. The discovery of these footprints was not immediate. For years, shifting sands concealed and revealed them in cycles of wind and rain. It was only with careful study that archaeologists confirmed their human origin. Using radiocarbon dating of seeds trapped in the same layers, they traced the prints back to the Ice Age. Imagine it. A group of people, walking across a wet plain, unaware that their journey would one day change history. Some tracks suggest play, children running and circling, others reveal purposeful movement, adults carrying loads, traveling with intention. Among the prints are those of giant sloths and mammoths, reminders that these humans shared the land with creatures now extinct. The scene preserved is not only human footsteps, but an entire vanished world. What makes White Sands so haunting is the intimacy of the record. Most of archaeology deals in stone, bones, and ruins, objects that feel distant, abstract, removed from the living moment. But a footprint is different. It is direct, immediate, a touch across time. To stand before those ancient tracks is to stand in the very place where another human once paused, thousands of years ago, their heel pressed down, their toes lifted, their weight shifted with each step. It collapses the gulf of time, making the past tangible, close, alive. White Sands does not show us myths or monuments, but something far simpler and more profound. The everyday act of walking, of being human, caught and held in the earth for millennia. The implications of these footprints ripple outward. If humans were present in the Americas 20,000 years ago, then the old theories of migration must be reconsidered. The idea that people arrived only after ice sheets retreated may no longer hold. Perhaps they came earlier, by routes still debated, along coastlines now drowned, across ice bridges, or through passages we have yet to uncover. The prints challenge us to see human history not as a straight line, but as a story full of unexpected chapters. Just as myths of ancient presence in the Americas endure, so too do the footprints suggest that memory may stretch deeper than once believed. They remind us that our understanding of the past is always provisional, that new discoveries can overturn the narratives we thought were certain. Beyond science, White Sands carries a symbolic resonance. In the footprints of children playing, we see innocence, continuity, the timeless rhythm of life. In the stride of adults, we see survival, endurance, the determination to move forward even in harsh landscapes. These tracks become metaphors for humanity itself, fragile, fleeting, yet enduring against all odds. They survived not because they were meant to, but because of chance, the right mix of soil, water, and preservation. And in that chance survival, we glimpse the truth of all history, that what remains is not everything, but fragments, footsteps across shifting sands, preserved just long enough to remind us of what once was. They are both literal and symbolic, proof of presence and echoes of memory. As we gaze upon the White Sands footprints, we sense a thread tying us to those who came before. They are not kings or builders, not myths of lost empires or shining cities. They are ordinary people walking across a wet plain, their steps forgotten until the earth revealed them once more. And perhaps that is why they move us so deeply. For they remind us that history is not only written in monuments and myths, it is written in the quiet, everyday acts of survival, in footsteps that cross deserts, in paths worn through forests, in trails that vanish yet linger in memory. White Sands is a reminder that the past is alive beneath our feet, waiting to be uncovered, that even in silence, the earth remembers, and that the simplest mark, a footprint in the sand, can carry the weight of eternity. Atlantis has always lingered at the edge of imagination. First spoken of by Plato more than 2,000 years ago, it was described as a powerful island civilization that fell into the sea in a single night of catastrophe. For centuries, people have debated whether it was history, allegory, or something in between. Explorers searched the coasts of the Mediterranean, the depths of the Atlantic, the sands of the Sahara. Each new ruin, each strange formation, each forgotten city has been cast in the shadow of Atlantis. It is less a place than an idea, a symbol of human greatness and fragility. And again, we return to it, drawn by the hope that its truth still waits, hidden beneath silt and time. Plato described Atlantis not simply as a city, but as a warning. Its people were said to be advanced, wealthy, and proud. Yet pride became hubris, and hubris led to destruction. Whether literal or metaphorical, the tale endures because it reflects a truth about civilization itself. No matter how strong or brilliant a society becomes, it remains vulnerable to collapse. Atlantis is both memory and mirror. When we imagine its fall, we are also imagining our own. It is a caution whispered across ages. Do not believe that your world is permanent. Others believe the same, and they too were wrong. Yet Atlantis is more than a warning. It is a dream of lost potential. To some, it represents an age when humanity possessed knowledge and technology far beyond what we believe possible for the ancient world. Legends of crystal towers, flying machines, and boundless wisdom have been woven into the myth, reshaping Plato's island into a utopia erased too soon. Writers, explorers, and mystics have claimed to know its location, from the Azores to Antarctica. Each new claim renews the allure, for even if the evidence remains elusive, the desire persists. The dream that we were once more than we are, and that perhaps we can be again. The search for Atlantis is also a search for meaning. In the sands of Egypt, in the ruins of the Americas, in the drowned terraces of Yonaguni, seekers find echoes of Plato's tale. Even when scholars dismiss these connections, the imagination lingers. Could these be fragments of the same lost chapter? Could the memory of a real catastrophe have spread, transformed into story, carried across cultures as mythic memory? This is what makes Atlantis eternal. It adapts to each generation, reflecting its fears and hopes. To Renaissance thinkers, it was a model of enlightened science. To explorers, it was a promise of golden cities beyond the horizon. To us today, it is both cautionary tale and hopeful vision. Returning to Atlantis also means confronting the unknown within ourselves. Why do we yearn for a lost world? Perhaps because it reassures us that greatness is not confined to the present, that human potential has always reached further than we realize. Atlantis symbolizes a continuity of achievement and collapse, a reminder that we are not the first to dream of permanence, nor the first to watch it fall. Its waters hold both tragedy and promise. Tragedy in its destruction, promise in the idea that wisdom survives, waiting to be rediscovered when humanity is ready. To seek Atlantis is to seek not just a place, but a vision of ourselves at once fragile and infinite. And so, the return to Atlantis is not about finding a city of stone beneath the waves. It is about returning to the questions that have always haunted us. Where did we come from? What have we forgotten? What warnings did our ancestors leave behind? Atlantis endures because it is both absence and presence. An absence of ruins, but a presence in every myth of floods, every story of lost ages, every ruin that seems older than it should be. To speak of Atlantis is to open the imagination, to let wonder guide inquiry, to balance skepticism with hope. Whether it lies beneath the sea or only in the human mind, it remains one of the greatest stories we carry, a reminder that history is never complete, that what is lost may one day be found, and that searching itself is as important as discovery. Myth is the memory of a people breathing through story, a soft lantern held against the long corridors of time. Where archives end and ruins fall silent, myth continues in whispers and rhythms, carrying lessons across generations like embers cupped in careful hands. It does not try to measure the past with rulers and clocks. It cradles it with symbol and feeling, turning loss into language and fear into form. Floods become parables of renewal. Sunken cities become mirrors for pride. Hidden kingdoms become promises that wisdom survives the storm. Myths endure because they hold what facts alone cannot, the texture of awe, the pulse of warning, the ache of longing we inherit without knowing why. They are not the opposite of truth, but truth's older garment, woven when memory was sung and the night sky was a book of signs. To listen is to feel the hush of ancestors settling around the fire, asking us to remember what the earth remembers too. Paragraph 2. Cultural memory travels best by mouth and music, by cadence and repetition that make words nest in the body as well as the mind. Elders shape a tale, children echo its bones, and each retelling adjusts the edges so the heart of the story can keep living in new weather. The details wander, names migrate, landscapes change their colors, and yet the core returns like a tide that knows its shore. Poets stitch refrains to hold the pattern, dancers mark the turns, carvers set symbols in wood and stone so the ear and eye can agree on meaning. In this way, myth becomes a humming architecture, a structure of memory that stands even when houses fall and scripts are lost to rain. What archaeology unearths in shards, myth preserves in arcs, offering a map of feeling that points toward buried rooms of fact. We navigate between them gently, letting story and strata speak to one another in the slow music of understanding. Within these stories live shapes that seem to belong to everyone, deep figures that psychologists call archetypes, the flood, the lost paradise, the descent and the return. Such patterns arise because human memory keeps what is charged with emotion, and myth concentrates feeling until it crystallizes into symbol. Communities rehearse these symbols in ritual, seasonal dramas that reset the inner clock to the outer world, binding people to soil, star, and one another. A procession follows the sun's path, a hymn counts the moon's steps, a mask turns the invisible into a face we can greet without fear. Temples and waystones become anchors for remembrance, geography itself enlisted as a library where hills speak and rivers recall. The mind learns the land, and the land learns the mind, and myth is the quiet treaty between them, renewing meaning each time a story is told. In this covenant, memory does not merely persist, it ripens, gaining fragrance as it passes from hand to hand. Myth also keeps the bruise of catastrophe, the sudden nights when fire fell or water rose and the familiar world came unstitched. Survivors do not always write, but they almost always speak, and their grief condenses into tales that travel further than any wall can stand. A shoreline swallowed becomes a song of warning, a star that vanished becomes a sign of judgment, an underground refuge becomes a tunnel into the soul's endurance. Across oceans we hear cousins to the same refrain, lands drowned and peoples led to higher ground, doors closing below and doors opening within. Such stories are not ledgers, yet they point in the direction of events whose fingerprints lie in silt and stone, guiding hands to the right layer, the right bay, the right forgotten road. In this way, myth is both memory and compass, a tender instrument that keeps turning until it finds the north of what truly happened. We follow its needle softly, grateful for a hint when maps are blank. But memory in story is powerful, and power is tempted to borrow its glow, bending legends to flatter thrones or feed crusades. Golden ages are painted brighter to justify new empires, chosen peoples are crowned in mythic light that blinds them to the faces of their neighbors. When this happens, caution is love, and scholarship becomes a kindness that steadies the tale without breaking its spell. For myth is at its best when it comforts without closing minds, when it heals without hardening into iron certainty. Diasporas carry it like seed, planting identity in unfamiliar soil, letting children feel they belong to a thread that cannot be cut. New mediums keep the thread unbroken, ink and film and the bright murmuring web, where old motifs learn new voices without losing their breath. Through all these changes, the heart of cultural memory remains a quiet vow to keep what matters alive and to keep it gentle. So we let myth walk beside science, two companions on the same long road, one holding the lamp of meaning, the other the lens of method. Myth asks the beautiful questions, science tests the faithful answers, and together they bring us closer to the shape of what once was and what might yet be. When the soil yields a pillar, the story teaches us how to listen, and when the story grows wild, the soil reminds us how to touch ground. Cultural memory is not a museum, it is a garden, and tending it requires humility, patience, and the soft courage to prune without wounding the roots. We honor the ancestors by keeping their songs supple, by letting them breathe in present air, by admitting mystery where certainty cannot kindly stand. In that tenderness, the past becomes a companion rather than a chain, a hand on the shoulder guiding us toward wiser shores. And as we walk, the lantern of myth flickers warm against the dark, steady enough to lead us on. Skepticism and belief are two rivers that flow side by side, sometimes converging, sometimes pulling apart, yet always shaping the landscape of how we see the past. When a story of a lost civilization rises, skepticism asks for proof, for measurements, for carbon dates and stratigraphic layers. Belief asks for meaning, for resonance, for the feeling that myths echo something more than invention. Neither is wrong, and neither can fully silence the other. The ruins themselves seem to invite both voices. A stone may be explained as geology by one gaze, and as a wall by another. Between them lies the fragile balance of human curiosity. We doubt because we wish not to be fooled. We believe because we wish not to miss what wonder has to offer. Skepticism reminds us that history is too precious to be built on illusions. Without careful testing, legends can swell into fantasies that lead us far from truth. There have been countless claims of Atlantis found, each announced with fervor, only to fade when closer study revealed cracks in the story. Sonar images that appeared to show grids on the seafloor dissolved into ordinary geology under more careful scans. Alignments that seemed too perfect crumbled when broader context was considered. Skepticism in this way protects us, guarding against the eagerness of imagination that sometimes outruns reality. It is the anchor that keeps us steady when tides of speculation rise too quickly. Belief, however, has its own power. Without it, we might never search at all. It was belief that led Schliemann to dig at Hisarlik, uncovering Troy where most scholars saw only myth. It was belief that guided explorers into jungles where Maya cities waited under green canopies, long dismissed as legend. Belief dares us to dream beyond accepted boundaries, to follow whispers that science has not yet confirmed. It does not always lead to discovery, but when it does, the world expands. Belief is not blindness, but a willingness to imagine that the past is wider than our present maps allow. Between skepticism and belief lies the path most fruitful, a path where open wonder meets disciplined care, where we allow ourselves to be inspired by myth but not consumed by it, where we test ideas without ridiculing the questions that birthed them. Skepticism provides the tools, the lenses and scales, the methods of inquiry. Belief provides the courage, the willingness to dig, to dive, to look again where others say there is nothing to see. When these two forces meet in harmony, discoveries are made that neither alone could have brought to light. Together they create a rhythm, a pulse of doubt and faith that keeps the search alive. Yet the dance is delicate. Too much skepticism and the heart closes, unwilling to see anything but dust where wonder stirs. Too much belief and the mind clouds, mistaking mirages for mountains. History needs both, as a bird needs two wings, one wing to lift with hope, the other to steady with reason. The footprints of white sands, the terraces of Yonaguni, the stones of Baalbek, each invites us to feel that tension. Skepticism warns us not to leap too far, belief asks us not to hold back completely. It is in that tension that history breathes most deeply, half shadow, half light, and so we listen to both voices. To the skeptic who whispers caution, who asks for patience and proof, and to the believer who whispers possibility, who insists that not everything has yet been told. Together they weave the search into something richer than either alone could make it. For history is not only a ledger of facts, nor only a dream of lost golden ages. It is the meeting of the two, the steadying of evidence with the wings of imagination. Skepticism and belief will always walk together, sometimes quarreling, sometimes embracing, but always leading us deeper into the mystery of who we are. Time is not always a straight road, though we often imagine it that way. In the classrooms of our youth, history is taught as a line that stretches from caves to cities, from ancient empires to our own modern age. It feels neat, progressive, inevitable. Yet myths and ruins tell a different story. They whisper that time may not be an arrow at all, but a circle, a wheel that turns endlessly through rise and fall. Civilizations blossom, flourish, reach great heights, and then collapse, leaving fragments behind. Out of those fragments, others rise, thinking themselves the first, unaware they are walking paths already trodden. The cycle of time is both comfort and warning, reminding us that what has been lost may return, and what is strong today may one day fade into dust. In India, the sages spoke of vast ages called yugas, each cycle carrying humanity from clarity to decline until destruction cleanses the world and renewal begins again. The Greeks imagined their golden, silver, bronze, and iron ages, each a step down in virtue, each ending in chaos before the cycle reset. The Maya counted back tunes, great wheels of creation and destruction, measuring not just years but epochs. These traditions from distant lands echo one another, suggesting a shared intuition that time repeats, that endings are not final but preludes to beginnings. When we listen to these myths, we are not hearing only metaphor. We are hearing memory, cultures trying to grasp the pattern of history as they watched cities rise, empires fall, and new worlds emerge from the ashes. Even within recorded history, the pattern is clear. The Roman Empire stretched across continents, its roads and aqueducts binding Europe together in ways unmatched for centuries. Yet it fell, and much of its knowledge fell with it. Libraries burned, cities emptied, technologies forgotten. Europe wandered in shadows, while fragments of Rome's brilliance survived only in monasteries and distant lands. Centuries later, that knowledge returned, reborn in a renaissance that looked back to ancient light. This is not progress as a line, but progress as a spiral, revisiting places already past, but at a new height, a new angle, a new age. The cycle breathes even in our own time, though we are reluctant to see it. When we turn to archaeology, the cycles become more haunting. Göbekli Tepe, rising 12,000 years ago with monumental pillars, suggests a sophistication far earlier than expected. Yet the site was deliberately buried, as if to close one chapter before another began. Civilizations in Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, the Andes, and Mesoamerica all rose to greatness, then declined, leaving echoes of their glory scattered across stone. None endured forever. Each thought itself permanent, yet time reminded them otherwise. Their myths preserved fragments of what was lost, stories of floods, fires, or divine endings that mirrored the collapse of their worlds. In their ruins we see not a line but the imprint of cycles, the wheel turning again and again. The cyclical view of time humbles us. It tells us that our skyscrapers, satellites, and networks are not unshakable. That climate, catastrophe, or hubris could scatter us as surely as it did Rome, the Maya, or forgotten Ice Age peoples. What would remain if our age fell? Fragments of concrete, twisted metal, perhaps a few enduring monuments interpreted by future eyes as myths of gods and giants. Our digital archives could vanish in a breath, leaving only faint traces of a world once global and connected. If cycles rule history, then our own age is not the pinnacle, but a chapter. And like all chapters, it may close, waiting for another to begin. Yet the cycles also bring hope. For if decline is inevitable, so too is renewal. The wheel does not end in ruin, it turns toward rebirth. Each fall scatters seeds for the next rise. Each collapse teaches lessons that the next age may carry forward. In this sense, myth becomes not just memory, but medicine, guiding us through endings with the promise of beginnings. The cycles remind us that even in loss, we are part of something larger than ourselves. That time is vast, that humanity is resilient, that history is a wheel on which we are passengers as much as drivers. To understand cycles is to walk more humbly, more gently, knowing that nothing is permanent and that perhaps that is the beauty of it. For most of history, discovery meant walking into the unknown with little more than courage and instinct. An explorer followed a river, a sailor watched the horizon, an archaeologist brushed away the earth grain by grain. The tools were simple, the pace slow, the dangers many. Yet in our age, the tools of discovery have transformed, giving us new ways to peel back the layers of earth and sea, to glimpse the secrets once thought unreachable. We no longer depend only on rumor or accident. Satellites, drones, and algorithms now join the shovel and the trowel. The search for lost civilizations has become not just a matter of endurance, but of technology, of eyes that see farther, deeper, and in ways the human body never could. The ocean, vast and still mostly unknown, is the greatest frontier for these tools. More than 80% of the seafloor has never been mapped in high resolution. If whole cities sank at the end of the Ice Age, their stones likely rest beneath those dark waters. Autonomous underwater drones glide silently through the depths, scanning landscapes with sonar and building three-dimensional maps that reveal structures hidden beneath silt. Artificial intelligence combs through this endless data, searching for the straight lines and right angles that might suggest human design rather than natural form. What once took decades of diving can now be glimpsed in weeks of mapping. The ocean is still vast, but for the first time we can imagine exploring it systematically, as though turning the pages of a submerged library. On land, satellites act as our new eyes. Orbiting high above, they peer through deserts and jungles with infrared imaging and ground-penetrating radar, exposing buried pyramids, forgotten roads, and ancient foundations unseen from the ground. In Egypt, satellites have identified the outlines of temples still hidden beneath sand. In the Amazon, vast networks of settlements once thought impossible have been revealed, reshaping our sense of what this rainforest once held. In Central America, LiDAR technology, a form of airborne laser scanning, has uncovered entire Maya cities hidden under dense canopies, their plazas and causeways mapped in astonishing detail. These tools remind us that much of our past is still buried, not because it is gone, but because it is hidden from our limited sight. Technology widens that sight, lifting veils once thought permanent. Even beyond Earth, some dream that discovery may stretch to other worlds. The moon, with its stillness and lack of atmosphere, could hold artifacts undisturbed for millions of years if once touched by human or other intelligence. Mars, with its dried rivers and lost seas, tempts us with the possibility of life or civilizations forgotten long before ours. Though these ideas remain speculation, they reflect the same yearning to know if the story of intelligence, of culture, of civilization is larger than our planet alone. Space probes and rovers become the new archaeologists, brushing not sand but Martian dust, scanning not ruins but landscapes for patterns that may one day whisper of forgotten builders. Even if nothing is found, the act of searching connects us to the same impulse that once guided hands to dig at Troy or sail into unknown seas. The challenge, however, is not only in gathering data but in interpreting it. A satellite may reveal shapes in the desert, but are they roads or mere shadows? A sonar scan may show grids beneath the waves, but are they walls or fractures in stone? Technology gives us eyes sharper than ever, yet those eyes still depend on human judgment. Our biases, our desires, our fears shape what we see, leading us sometimes toward revelation, sometimes toward illusion. The tools of discovery are powerful, but they do not replace the need for balance, for the careful dance of skepticism and belief. They widen the field of possibility, but the responsibility of truth remains with us. And so, the tools of discovery are not the end of wonder, but its expansion. They allow us to ask questions our ancestors could not, to see further into the deep past, to listen more closely to the whispers of earth and sea. Yet they also remind us of our limits, that even with all our instruments we may never know everything. What we uncover may be fragments, outlines, echoes rather than complete answers. But perhaps that is enough. To know that the search continues, that the tools in our hands keep lighting paths into the dark. In this way, discovery remains what it has always been, not only about what we find, but about the act of seeking itself, guided by curiosity, humility, and the quiet hope that the earth still has stories left to tell. The search for lost civilizations has never been only about stones or maps. It is about us, about the quiet hunger we carry to understand where we came from and what has been forgotten. Atlantis, Shambhala, Mu, Agartha. These names are not just places, they are mirrors reflecting our desire for continuity, for wisdom, for meaning in a world that often feels fragile. The eternal quest is not a single journey, but a rhythm of yearning, a cycle passed from generation to generation. Plato imagined, explorers sailed, archaeologists dug, scientists scanned, and still the search goes on. We cannot let it rest because the act of searching has become part of our human identity. We are not content with the known horizon. We lean toward mystery, as if drawn by an unseen tide that insists there is more. This quest is eternal because the answers always slip just beyond reach. A ruin is uncovered, but questions remain. A footprint is dated, but new doubts emerge. A myth is explained, yet its resonance deepens rather than fades. Each discovery resolves one riddle and opens another, and so the search does not end. It unfolds like an endless scroll. The myths keep adapting, reflecting our anxieties and our hopes. In an age of climate change, flood stories return with new urgency. In a time of technological upheaval, hidden kingdoms symbolize lost wisdom waiting for rediscovery. The quest bends to fit the contours of the moment, and in this way it remains alive. We never exhaust it because it is not only about the past, but about the shifting present that keeps asking what it all means. The eternal quest also endures because it comforts as much as it unsettles. To imagine lost civilizations is to admit that greatness existed before us and therefore may exist again after us. It humbles us, reminding us that collapse is possible, that no empire is invincible, that memory is fragile. Yet it also inspires us, suggesting that wisdom is never truly gone, only waiting beneath the surface for hands and minds ready to receive it. The quest carries both fear and hope, loss and promise, woven together like strands of the same story, and perhaps this tension is why it lingers so powerfully. We need it to remind us of our limits, and we need it to reassure us of our potential. In its duality, it speaks to the whole of the human condition. Technology now gives us tools unimaginable to those who first told these myths. Satellites scan deserts, drones map oceans, artificial intelligence sifts through infinite data for signs of order among chaos. Yet even as our instruments sharpen, the quest retains its mystery. For what matters is not only what we find, but how the search changes us. To scan the ocean floor is to confront the immensity of what we do not yet know. To peer beneath the jungle canopy is to feel wonder at civilizations once thriving where silence now reigns. The tools may change, but the yearning they serve is ancient, a yearning that has always driven us to look beyond the visible, to imagine what lies beneath, to believe that history is deeper than it seems. And so the eternal quest is not really about Atlantis or Shambhala or any single name we give to the lost world. It is about the longing itself, the human refusal to accept that what is gone completely. It is about the instinct to listen to myths, to walk toward ruins, to dig beneath sand, to peer into the sea, to keep asking questions that may never have final answers. This persistence is what binds us to our ancestors and to those who will come after. For as long as there are humans to wonder, there will be myths to guide, ruins to puzzle, and mysteries to seek. The eternal quest is not solved, it is lived. Each generation picks up the lantern and steps into the dark, searching not only for lost civilizations, but for themselves within the ruins. Perhaps that is the greatest truth the quest reveals, that the search matters more than the finding, that Atlantis, whether it ever existed or not, has already fulfilled its purpose by calling us into wonder, by teaching us humility, by binding us together in shared curiosity. The eternal quest will never end, nor should it. For in its endlessness lies its meaning. We are creatures of memory and imagination, unwilling to live without mystery, unwilling to believe that the story is complete. And so we walk on, through sands and seas, through myths and ruins, carrying the question forward like a torch. The eternal quest is not to prove, but to wonder, not to finish, but to continue. And in that continuation, we remain fully human.